Hello friends, uh, I'm Vinay Krishna and welcome to webinar hosted by Pingala Software. Pingala Software is a technology startup based in Bangalore, and we are working on cutting edge technologies such as blockchain, IoT, AI, ML, cloud agnostic solutions. We also work on DevOps, DevSecOps, Agile, and digital transformation. So today's topic is design thinking in agile organization, and I'm very glad to inform you that today we have Melanie with us to enlighten on this topic. So I would like to welcome Melanie. So welcome, Melanie. How are you?
I'm well. Hi, everybody. It's so nice to have you on this webinar. This is my first webinar for an audience in India, so it's a true honor to be talking with you today. And so we tend to do these things quite informally. Feel free to drop questions as we go in the chat. I might wait until after the presentation to answer them, unless if Vinay or Rob, you're looking at the questions coming in, and if it's if it's at the right juncture to answer that question, I'm happy to pause. It's just harder to do that well.
Okay. So, give me 2 minutes, Melanie. I will just introduce you formally, so which has not been done so far. So friends, Melanie is a co-founder and CEO of CO8 Group, and she is a forward-thinking customer experience leader. She is an enthusiastic instructor, facilitator, mentor, and public speaker. She is having a very rich experience on integrated service design, user experience, agile, OKRs, design thinking, and she has actually worked with the team, worked with the customer business needs, and made the team high performing, cross functional, and the most important is like delivering high value products and services consistently. So yeah, over to you, Melanie. Now things are, yeah.
And to build on what Vinay mentioned of what we do at the Create Group, we help organizations accelerate results, and we do that through alignment, business agility, and customer centricity. So today, as we talk about design thinking in agile organization, if we take that big bird's eye view of business agility, is really to enable organization to adapt to change as risk and new opportunities present themselves. We have agility in terms of software development, and it's a mindset and it's a practice in our day-to-day on how we make decisions. So this is where, for me, there's tremendous overlap between an agile approach. I believe my co-founder Rob is on the call. We also are a startup. We founded the Create Group about 1.5 years ago, and I think we also have Bessie on the call. Bessie is our VP of operations. Bessie. So as we dive into the topic, I thought I'd bring up a couple of slides on the Agile Manifesto. Let's go back to these principles that what matters most as we deliver products and services to our customers. And right at the core of the Agile Manifesto, we have customer collaboration. The first one, individual interactions and individuals and interactions over processes and tools. So what we're looking for are those lightweight methods, frameworks to allow us to work iteratively and always connecting to what the customer needs. And responding to change over following a plan is at the core of an agile way of working, and is also at the core of design thinking. It's really about validated learning cycles. And when we look at the Agile Manifesto, the 12 principles, the very first principle is our highest priority is to satisfy the customer. So it is about delivering products and services that will resonate with customers. All right, can you see me now? Yeah, good. The one that intrigues me, the Agile Manifesto was written over almost 20 years ago. And the second principle is we welcome changing requirements even late in development. And as we design and develop products and services, the learning will be constant. And yet, there are other frameworks that have matured since then that helps us with this discovery. So there are no big can mute yourself. And
guys, I will just request all the participants if you can mute yourself, and even if you can turn off your webcam or that video, that will be really great, because that way you will be able to avoid that noise in that case. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Right, so we will always be welcoming changing requirements. What we want to avoid is those big moments when we realize that the customer actually wanted something else than what we've been developing. This is where design thinking can help us at the front end. So I talked earlier about a lot of overlap with different frameworks. If you're familiar with user-centered design, this diagram is very familiar. Right? So what we propose is to start our research with what is desirable for the human. So that means for the people we're designing for. What often happens is we spend most of our time in the business requirements, in the product requirement, on the technology, and we have some understanding of the people we're designing for, but there are a lot of assumptions. So while we hope to land in the middle of this diagram, we often land a little bit to the right. So it meets more of the business requirements of technology. And we learn sometimes a little later in the game what was truly desirable for the people we're designing for. So let's look at a couple of use cases. This one is about GE. And a couple of years ago, they actually won a design award for an MRI machine. And you can imagine the development, the research and development that goes into creating those machines. So they are very, very precise pieces of technology. And there's a human component. How do humans interact with, how do we feel when we're inside of these systems? How do we stay still? And what happened is Doug Dietz was the design lead on this project. And after he won an award, he thought, awesome, let's go see the MRI in action at a hospital. And what happened is that the very first patient that day was a little girl who needed to have an MRI done. And she arrived with her parent, and the little girl was absolutely terrified. For those of you who have experienced MRI machines, they are not the friendliest things. They are very intimidating. And when children are told that their parents will not be able to stay, they won't be able to move in the machine, they have to stay still, there's a big emotional response. So children tend to feel agitated, and in order to have them undergo the procedure, we see a high rate of sedation. Now what happens is, with a higher rate of sedation, each procedure is more expensive, it increases risk, and the overall experience for the children have been quite traumatic. So Doug Dietz, when he saw that, he's like, wow, it's like, in a way, we failed our most vulnerable patients. So how can we solve that? We cannot go back to the drawing board and redesign the MRI machine. But what can we do with a smaller budget to address these needs? So he heard about design thinking, and he went to do the week-long design thinking boot camp at Stanford University at the design school. And this is where, through a series of exercises and techniques, they came up with the idea of creating each room with a theme, something that's friendly to the children, something that makes it friendlier, more playful. It is far more part of their day-to-day vocabulary, as young children. Even the technician, the radiologist were in character. I remember reading about one of the room. It's a pirate adventure, and they even integrated all the noises of the machine in the narrative. They were telling children, you'll be going through a big storm, and on the other side, you'll discover a treasure. And it was an interesting measure of success. The children going from being terrified and wanting to run away to asking their parents, can I go again? The experience was fun. So as a result, the children had a positive experience. And on the business side, right, back to the business case of design thinking, it reduced the number of sedation. It decreased the duration of each MRI, and therefore it increased the number of MRIs they could do each day. So you can really see, if we go back to our Venn diagram, what's good for the business and what's good for the people we're designing for. It's that sweet spot in the middle. All right. The other use case I would like to present to you is one around the gig economy. And those are our friends over at Philosophy. It's a creative agency in New York City. They kindly share this use case with us. And so they start working with Prudential. Prudential is an insurance company. And what Prudential noticed is that they had, there was this completely emerging market of the gig economy. And in their traditional model of providing insurance to people through employers, they were missing out on this growing market segment. So using one of the design thinking tool is how might we, right? When you think of how might we tap into this emerging market while bringing value to the independent worker and companies who might hire them. So some of the pain points that independent workers have, people in the gig economy, their income can be unpredictable. They can spend a lot of time chasing payments from clients, and they don't have access to benefits associated with traditional organizations when you're a full-time employee of an organization. So here in the US, it can be healthcare, retirement accounts, dental insurance, car insurance, things like that. And for the companies face a significant overhead managing contracts and payments for contractors. So we see like there are a lot of needs here, and how do these come together in an innovative solution? So if we craft a how might we statement around this, is how might Prudential insert itself at crucial junctures in the financial lives of freelancers, therefore tapping these unmet needs and even offering new products, so partnering with health insurance providers to provide them on their platform. So they came up with a platform. It's called the Merlin platform. And so they are currently testing these new forms of insurance and benefits geared towards 1099 workers. So it's that platform where the company and the freelancers transact. So that's where the payments are secured, and that as Prudential inserts itself on that journey of the freelancer to sell new services that they would not have otherwise been able to sell. So for me, this is a really wonderful example of how might we enter a new market segment and delivering value all around. All right, so by now you might start getting a sense that with design thinking, the core of design thinking is to develop, I call those the 3 Ps, to develop a deep understanding of the problem that needs to be solved, of the people we're designing for, and of what's possible. All that in order to deliver products and services of high value that people will use. At the very core of design thinking, we talk about the design thinking mindset. So back to design thinking in Agile organization. When we think of Agile, it's a mindset as much as a practice. And for me, in design thinking is the same. There's the mindset and how do we execute this technique on a day-to-day basis. And at the very core of design thinking is empathy. So thinking back of that little girl walking in for her MRI. So it's for us as product managers, designers, developers, anyone who interacts with the customers we're serving, is to walk in their shoes. What does the service or the product look like from their perspective? And that's why it brings us to the number 2, the beginner's mindset. While we have a lot of knowledge of our of the product space, we have knowledge of the customers we're serving. To put that knowledge aside when we go talk to them, when we observe them in their environment, and bring those new insights to augment what we currently know, that's the true power of design thinking. And the third one, embrace ambiguity, because sometimes the process is going to be messy. We don't always have a clear-cut answer from the beginning of what the right solution is. So it's a discovery process. I often think of like it's pulling something out of the mud and trying to understand what is in front of us, what is the solution. And what I love about design thinking, at the very core, it's full of optimism. How can we make a difference, bring value to our customers, to the business? We all are designers. And to have that creative confidence that together as a team, we can imagine these new services and give shape. And then design thinking has a bias for action. Again, right? Think back of your agile mindset and practice. It's through the delivery of working software. So through design thinking, it's not about writing long specs. It's let's make it. Let's build a prototype. Let's test. Let's learn and iterate. So for me, the mindset, when we understand the mindset, when we look at the techniques and the tools, we understand how they fit. And just as a little side note, the Luma Institute, I think they are in the Washington, D.C. area. A few years ago, they wanted to catalog like how many design thinking tools and activities are there out there. And they cataloged over 1,000. So it's a big catalog. And as you will practice design thinking, along the way, you'll discover the tools and techniques that work best for you. But coming back to this design thinking mindset, what is the right tool for the job? Now, our usual way of working, and this is natural, we are problem solvers at the very core. That's how we think. So very often, we will start with a solution. And we have a basic understanding of the problem. We kind of know what the outcome is. But the value proposition is to really take time to understand the problem deeply. And that's where we have a lot of techniques to understand the problem. And our understanding of the problem will evolve across the project. And then what's also really important is to understand the desired outcomes. So how will the world be better with our solution? So the goal to me is to fall in love with the problem and to fall in love with the outcome, and the solution will come. And the first solution that we think about may not be the best solution. So that's something you'll become very familiar as you embark on your journey in design thinking. So the fuzzy front end. So often in organizations, we have an idea, or our customer has an idea, there's a request, and somehow it finds its way in the pipeline, and we begin implementing it, only to find out a little bit later on that maybe this is not exactly what the customer meant, or it is not quite delivering the value that we had hoped for, or we're not seeing the adoption that we were hoping for. So for me, this is where design thinking brings the most value, and the mindset is totally applicable in the implementation phase as well, right? Those validated learning cycles, build, test, learn. So if we have an idea and we don't want to, go full on implementing it right away, what is going to happen in the middle? So for me, design thinking, if there are product managers, program managers on the call or on your teams, this is the language that they will speak. How do we balance cost, risk, and value? And the goal is to understand the level of investment and to match it to our level of certainty. So when we have an idea and we jump right away to implementation, what we see is a high level of investment, but a low level of certainty. We hope it's gonna meet our customers' need, but we won't know for sure until we roll it out. So the goal is to match our level of investment to our level of certainty. So this is managing risk, right? Early on in the project, we have a low level of certainty. So how might we match our level of investment to our level of certainty? And as we go in the project, as we increase certainty, let's increase our investment of time, of resources, and yeah. All right. So now we're going to focus a little bit more specifically on the phases of design thinking. So it's interesting, over the years, the language around the phases of design thinking has been evolving. And I think currently the phases of design thinking, as documented by the design school at Stanford, the first one is empathy. For me, I like discovery, because before we launch on these projects, let's align on what we currently know as a team. And then we will go augment what we know through our design research. And then we come back and reframe. So the empathy here is as much empathy for your colleagues, right? We're embarking on this journey together, as much as the empathy when we go do our design research and we learn directly from the people we're designing for about their needs and their hopes and you know, the pain points they experience. And then we come back as a team and we reframe the problem with these new insights. And then the last three phases, those are the validated learning cycles, where we ideate, we come up with an idea, we create a prototype, and we test it, and then repeat until we increase that level of certainty, and we're like, okay, I think this is a good bet. What we want to do is place a number of small bets up front to see which ones will be most promising. And that's why it's interesting when you think about bringing design thinking into your organization. The language you use will be very important. In the design thinking mindset a few slides ago, I'll go back, I was talking about learn from experiments. The language for that one is usually fail fast. And if you're talking to financial people in your organization, the idea of failure is not very palatable. So I evolved the language to say learn from your experiments. And as you learn from experiments, let's pivot, let's adapt. And sometimes there's an experiment that we discover is low value. Let's stop and let's continue to work on our other experiments that are high value. So it's much better to spend $5,000 on an experiment that we're gonna kill early instead of $500,000 on a project that we learn only at the end that it didn't meet our customer needs. So this is where I'm sure there will be a lot of questions around how to implement design thinking in your organization. So again, in terms of empathy, think about your finance people who will be new to this language and this approach. It's like, well, I don't want to lose $5,000. You probably don't want to lose, you know, $500,000 on a larger scale experiment. So that's where I was. Okay, so align on what we know, and then go do your design research, augment on what we know, and then the five cycles here. And design thinking is actually very, very similar to the scientific method. I was talking to a student recently who just graduated from an undergrad degree in biology, and he's very attracted to design thinking. And I'm like, wow, you know, with your scientific mindset, you are predisposed for the design thinking method. You ask a question, you do your research, you conduct your hypothesis, you test your experiment, you iterate, you draw a conclusion. So it's a very, very natural fit between design thinking and the scientific method. I was talking earlier about the amount of overlap there is between different frameworks, and one that you might hear a lot about is Lean Startup or Lean UX. And the idea is you build something very quickly, you test and you learn. And maybe with design thinking, we start with the learning, we build and we test, and we continue in these loops. So Lean Startup, Lean UX, again, build, test, learn, learn, build, test. Again, the idea is like small incremental experiments to increase our level of certainty that we're building the right thing. And if we're not, that pivot as quickly as possible. An example I like to give here around Lean UX and Lean Startup, I think it was already 20 years ago when the first company set out to sell online shoes. Typically, the way a company would have worked is that they would have built a full e-commerce platform. They would have built a full inventory of shoes and a full distribution system. But because they were a startup, they were thinking, how can we validate our assumption that people want to buy shoes online as quickly and as cheaply as possible? So what they did is they built the most minimum front-end e-commerce website. They went to local shoe stores, took pictures of available shoes, uploaded these to their website, shared the link with some friends, and then they waited. And as the first few purchases came in, they would run to the store, buy the shoes, and go ship the shoes to their customers. Someone asked me, well, Melanie, they didn't make any money on this. I'm like, no, but they didn't invest, $500,000 to validate this proposition. So at this point in time, they were able to validate their hypothesis. Do people want to buy shoes online? So yes, what is the next question we want to answer, and what experiment are we going to conduct to validate that question? So for me, the Lean Startup, Lean UX, design thinking have a lot of similarities. And I'm going to share with you a slide from our friends again over at Philosophy. As you bring design thinking into your organization, you might adapt the language. There are 5 phases, based on the D School in Stanford. But what I see is a lot of organizations will collapse those 5 phases into 3. So here at Philosophy, they talk about understand, ideate, and make. And our friends over at Cisco, for them, their 3 phases is discover, define, explore. So as long as you really understand the intent of the framework, by all means, adapt it to your organization, simplify it where you can, use the language that you use on your day-to-day basis. So it's not this foreign thing over there that only some people do. It speaks in a language that aligns with as many people in your organization. And through facilitating a lot of design thinking over time, I started to think about what are the 4 truths of behavioral organization. And the first one is that people value firsthand knowledge. So by that, I mean, if I get to experience something firsthand, I will value this information more than if you tell me about somebody else's experience. So, or if I'm able to go research this thing myself, if I hold that knowledge myself in a decision-making process, I will value it more. So it connects with the second one. People are more likely to support decisions when they have been involved. So in design thinking, there's a lot of innovation, a lot of new ideas that come up. And the goal is to see those new promising ideas get implemented into the finish line. So even the best ideas need broad support. So I would invite you, as you bring design thinking into your organization, how do you bring people along for the journey of discovery, understanding what's going on with these new ideas, how we are validating, these experiments. So it becomes their first-hand knowledge, and they'll support these ideas to the finish line. And then the fourth one, this is more from lean manufacturing. Information is lost with each handoff. So how do you, again, bring your colleagues along for the journey so they have this, they develop that first-hand knowledge. So often is if we do recordings of interviews with our customers, or if we do videos when we go observe them in a context we want to learn more about, we bring those back. So we want to communicate with a high level of fidelity to our colleagues our learnings. So that in itself is a design challenge. You don't want to overburden your colleagues with too much information, and at the same time, you want to help them develop that sense of ownership on this information. So I'm not sure if this resonates with your experience. So it's about decision making and having people support decisions and initiatives. All right, so I can give a quick example of some of the techniques, and we will be offering a hands-on workshop in the coming weeks, so we can discuss that later on. But what I'm going to propose here to share with you are some techniques to give you a sense of what some of those design thinking tools are. So if you remember about my slide earlier on, often we start with a solution, and it can be quite a challenge to articulate what is the problem, what are we trying to solve. And just like, riding a bicycle, it does take a little practice. And the way I like to craft problem statement is if you run into someone at the grocery store and in one sentence you want to tell them, what's the problem that you're working on? So it's one sentence, it's current state, it's not aspirational, like the world will be better if, but no, current state. We want to avoid solution and go for simplicity. And that will become a communication tool, again, across your organization as you're able to share the problem that you're trying to solve. So that clarity is very important. So if we go back to our early example of the MRI machine, children are scared of MRI machine. Very simple, very easy to understand. And that's something that people can align on and support. So there's a very fun, easy technique. Again, it's from our friends over at the Luma Institute. It's called the problem tree analysis. And this you don't even need to tell people that you're doing design thinking. If there are business analysts on your team, another variation of this is the 5 whys, right? It's really to understand, to decompose the problem a little bit. So again, with our MRI example, children are scared of the MRI machine. So what might be some of the causes? So again, like if you do a 5 why, you would get some of the same insights. So, well, maybe it's because the MRI machine is unfamiliar, the MRI is loud, it feels threatening and intimidating. And even as children are told to be brave, that might even heighten that sense of anxiety. Parents cannot stay during the procedure and they are told not to move. So we have a lot there to work with. And sometimes when the problem feels too big to solve, it's good to unpack it into, to break it down into some of its causes. So we can start targeting specific causes and start solving for those. And eventually we'll solve back to our initial problem. And so what might be some of the effects of this problem? We talked earlier about the high rate of sedation, the high cost of these procedures, the duration of the procedures, and it can be quite traumatic for the children. So these are very easy techniques to do with a team at the beginning of a project, or you can pull out your problem tree analysis at any juncture in your project where you feel, maybe we're losing our way a little bit. What are we trying to solve? And another juncture where I like to use these is when we get customer requests. Sometimes they'll come with the solution. Let's take a moment to fill out a problem tree analysis. What problem are you trying to solve? And what might be some of the causes and the effect? So if they propose a solution, sometimes we'll discover very quickly that the solution that the customer is proposing might not be actually the best method for solving their problem. So this is a simple, high power tool, one of my favorite. So from the problem statement, and this is something that we use constantly at the Co8 group, how might we? It's always at our disposal, and it shows how the mindset is shifting from solution to understanding the problem and opening up for different ideas. So in a how might we statement, we focus on the outcome. We don't have solutions embedded in them. But as you experiment with how might we statements, you'll see that the how might we statement is constrained. So they're right size, not too big, not too small, and they might have a constraint in them. We'll take a look in a moment. And they are phrased as a question. So most importantly, it invites multiple solutions. A few weeks ago, Rob and I, we were talking with high school students, and with COVID, many of them saw their internships canceled. So you can ask, well, how might we find new internships for the summer? But if you unpack why do you need an internship for? What is the value of an internship, right? If we go back to a variation on our problem tree analysis, what does this help you do? It helps you make professional connections. It helps you develop new experience in a certain field, and it might help make a little bit of money in the summer. So then if you change those into your how might we statement, how might we make new professional connections over the summer? How might we develop new skills over the summer? And how might find new ways to earn a little bit of revenue in the summer? So this thinking starts to open the space for creative solutions. My favorite again here. So in the case of our MRI machine, so children are scared of MRI machine. So we can ask, how might we make children less anxious? So it's still pretty open-ended. This one, how might we make MRI machines less scary for children by having children visit MRI rooms more often? What you'll notice here is that now we have a solution embedded in it, so we're constraining too much. And the last one might set a better platform for brainstorming is how might we make the experience easier for children by creating a friendlier experience. So you're constraining it a little bit by creating a friendlier experience, but you're not dictating what exact experience you're going to be designing for. So again, in a design thinking workshop, we would have time to start playing around with these techniques so you can become developing skills. So some of my favorite takeaways around all this is fall in love with the problem, not the solution. Keep coming back to the desired outcomes and let go of the solution. See the problems through the eyes of the people you're designing or developing for. And the first solution, while often adequate, is rarely the best one. And test early and learn as fast as possible. So this is my introduction to design thinking for Agile organization. And we have now quite a few minutes. I would love to hear your questions for those of you who have design thinking in your organizations. In which ways is it working well? In which ways do you see opportunities for improving? And for those who are new to design thinking, what questions might you have?
Okay, thanks, Melanie.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was nice, and I guess people has got good understanding of design thinking and the different techniques that is associated with this. I have one question from Silpa, and meanwhile others can type their question and queries. So her question is, how does design thinking relate to HR and its intervention, most importantly digital hiring?
Sorry. So the first part of the question is, how does design thinking relate to Agile? And the second part of the question?
How its intervention is, how does design thinking actually help in intervention, most importantly digital hiring? So basically HR, mostly related to digital hiring, how the design thinking can be related in that case, how they can use this in that case.
For ideating?
Yep.
Yeah. So it's interesting when we think of the, so how does design thinking relate to Agile? So we go back to the idea of, so there's Agile, the mindset and the practice. When we think of the Agile practice, we think of software development. So at that moment in time, we identified what is it that we want to build. And the design thinking helps us a little bit further upstream in this discovery is what do we currently think has value for the customer? What do we want to validate? So the way we, and you'll often hear from Google, the Google sprints, Google Venture sprints. They do 1 week design sprints. And this is when you gather a team and you might have a developer, you might have a designer, you will bring in customers, and you'll start with a hypothesis and you will create the quickest possible prototype to test that assumption and to learn from your customers. And from this learning, at one point, you'll develop that understanding of, are we ready to start building a prototype to start investing real code in our prototype, and then that would enter the pipeline for design and development teams. So that moment when it transitions from being at the front end to the design and development comes a little bit with experience. You might do 2 rounds of iterations with throwaway prototypes just to validate ideas. And when you're like, okay, like we have a good enough certainty that this has value for our customer, we're actually going to continue to build our prototype with production ready code. And again, with each sprint that you have, you bring back your customer and you validate. So this is where the partnership with your UX team is really important, to make sure that at the very core of your Agile practice, you constantly bring the voice of the customer, your research with your customer, whether it's during your demos or additional activity. Does that answer the question?
So, Melanie, anyway, this answer to another question by another guy, but the question which I was referring that time was related to HR, human resource.
Oh,
so
HR.
It was, yeah, it was related to HR. And yeah, so design thinking, how it can be related to HR, and especially when they are going for a digital hiring.
I'm so glad you're asking this question, because when you design for your internal stakeholders, it's so important to understand. So sometimes HR can feel, from an employee, that there's sometimes a disconnect or between what the employee wants and what HR thinks the customer wants. How to increase employment, the employee satisfaction with their job, with their employer. And so again, it starts with, let's say, an HR. I don't know if you have a specific question in mind, but if we start with a very open-ended question, how might we improve the employee experience at our organization, right? If you think of your learning cycle, learn, build, test, you would go maybe you might have surveys, data from a survey. You might go conduct some interviews with a sample of people in your organization. So then you will start to hear opportunities and maybe pain points. And you might want to start with a small experiment. How about if we provided services in this new way? Will this have value? Will this resonate better with our employees? Where are their pain points? So it's really what I like about design thinking is that it can help you solve also at the root cause. If there are big organizational impediments, something at the organizational culture, it helps to bring that to the surface, and it gives you the opportunity to experiment what will be the right solution to create either that best employee experience in your organization. So again, it's defining either the hypothesis or the pain point, the challenge or the opportunity, and how might you start creating little experiments within your organization to say, what if we solved it that way? Would that resonate? And then you get feedback on that.
Great. Yeah, I got your point here. Hope they have also able to correlate that. So I have another question from Lavita, and the question is, how do you decide that design thinking should be my approach to a particular problem and not any other problem solving techniques?
I need questions and repeated twice for me to fully understand and answer them
so
correctly.
The question is, how do you decide that you will use design thinking for a particular problem, right, and not any other problem solving techniques?
Yeah.
So the question would be like, okay, why do we go for design thinking for a particular problem? Why not something else?
Yeah, it's so if you have a problem, and so basically, if you go back to the value proposition of design thinking, it's a set of tools, it's a mindset to help you develop a better understanding of the problem, to develop that better understanding of the people you're designing for and what's possible. So whenever you see that need, it's design thinking approach and some of the design thinking tools become a good match. So would that answer it? It's so sometimes we think let's bring in design thinking. So is design thinking a solution, or what problem can design thinking solve, or what outcome can design thinking help you achieve? So to develop your sense of what resonates with customer, or to develop earlier that understanding of what people really need. So
yeah. Basically, it gives you a very systematic way to come up to a particular different type of possible solutions, which you can test and adapt, and finally you can come to a proper solution. So we do that, but yes, of course, not in a systematic way, and not having all those techniques what is there in a very nicely packed in the design thinking, right? So something that's what I feel. Yeah.
And your UX teams are already using a lot of design thinking tools. If you think of your customer journey maps, your persona maps, all the research that they do, when they have a very active voice at the table, and when they bring in the customer, you're already you have a big part of that already in your organization.
Yeah. There are lots of questions coming, so I will just take one more immediately. Like, you have already talked about design thinking getting fit into Agile. There is another part of that question: is it a practice like other engineering practices? So
yeah, for the engineering practices, on a daily basis, even engineering has there are multiple problems that you're trying to solve, and again, like that mindset. So a problem comes in, you think of a solution. Let's pause for a second. Do we really understand the problem? What outcomes are we looking for? And are there different ways of solving for that problem? So how might we? So for me, when I hear engineering teams use the how might we, it already indicates that design thinking mindset. And I was working with a company here in Boston, and they were implementing design thinking more at the front end. And on the team, on the design thinking team, were a couple of engineers, and the engineers went on those design thinking interviews with the customers, where they started learning new skills to talk to their customers. So to ask more open-ended questions, to be curious about their problem, because often when engineers interact with the customers is to solve a problem as quickly as possible. But to bring in the engineers in those conversations that are more exploratory, it really gives them fresh insights, and it reconnects the engineers to what is the problem that we're trying to solve and what value are we trying to deliver. So it was a very powerful testimonial to hear that from the engineer, how much it reconnected them to the why of their work.
Okay, yeah, great. So another question is from Srinivasan, and he's asking who are stakeholders required other than developers to start design thinking initiative in an organization, and what
Mhm.
is the involvement needed from them? So what type of involvement we require from them?
Yeah, it's the same as when organizations want to implement Agile. You can start at the team level, and for it to truly, it is always most effective when you have leadership buy-in and leadership support, especially when you will start working in this new way of, can we have, there's the 5-5-5, right? $5,000 for 5 weeks, 5 people, and we're going to conduct this experiment and we'll report back, right? Was it a successful experiment or do we need to pivot from there? So while you can do this work at the team level, the more you can get buy-in towards leadership level, it will make that organizational transformation. Because the question is, what happens once you come across a promising idea, and this might change, that this might change a little bit the portfolio or the program. You want to have you want people to support your design thinking approach early on. So yes, your stakeholders is really all levels of the organization, from finance to to your technology leaders, design leaders, product leaders, and if you can get the top leadership to embrace that, it's pretty powerful what we see. And actually,
Okay.
this is what we see, right? A lot of organizations will either do an agile transformation or they will do a design transformation, but where we see the next transformation in a way is to bring those two sides of the house together.
Okay. So we have next question from Seema, and her question is like, can design sprint and development sprint happens in parallel? For example, design sprint for one feature in parallel with development sprint for some other feature.
Yeah. So can design sprints happen at the same time? Yeah. So those come down to your working agreements. I know, for instance, in the SAFe framework, there's a sprint or part of a sprint or allocations where people can dedicate time to innovation. So that's a nice way to connect the two. And so again, it always goes back to where are we in the project? What is it that we want to develop a deeper understanding of? And it's actually quite refreshing for engineering teams who have been, really heads down coding, to come back up, get that breath of fresh air to work on a design sprint with our design and product colleagues, to do that exploration, to reconnect to the why. And after that, so can they happen in parallel? Are they serial? It depends also on the size of your teams and the cadence, how you work.
Yeah. One more question, that is, it is sometimes easy to find existing problems and generate problem statements. Are there any specific tips to instigate team members to think totally on next generation ideas?
All right, this is a question where I need it read twice, if you can.
Yeah. So what the question is, it is sometimes easy to find existing problems and generate problem statements. Are there any specific tips to instigate team members to think totally on next generation ideas? So I guess basically he's talking about innovations or something on that line. But again, that's my perspective. Like, even you are coming up with any new ideas, you have to find out that problem statement, right?
Yeah, and the two. So how to think of the next gen approach, so that it's both, right? It's like understanding the problem, and then when you create your how might we, what are all the ways that we might solve for this problem? And this is where you enter the ideation phase. So when we talk about design thinking, there's divergent and convergent phases. So that brainstorm is divergent. So this is where you invite a lot of ideas. and then you develop a way to, how do we vet those ideas and test those ideas? So there are specific junctures in the design thinking process to invite this ideation. And the next gen is very often on the mind of a lot of teams to invite that collaboration.
All right. So that another question is there any book resource with real-time examples in the field of design thinking in agile organizations or something you have?
Yeah, I actually have, right now I have this book on my desk. I forget what I was looking up in this book recently, but Change by Design. And this is by Tim Brown. And I believe Tim Brown is the founder of IDEO. And his brother, David Brown, is the head of the design school of the design thinking lab at Stanford. So the Tim Brown Change by Design and David Brown at the D School. And they're quite generous with free resources as well. So this is where I would start.
Okay. Another question is from Nelson. Is design thinking can be utilized only exclusively by product management team? How can you emphasize the same in team level?
Yeah. So to the last part of the question, Vinay, can you repeat that?
So how can we use it in the team level, the design thinking?
At the team level.
Yeah, only at the product management team we are going to use it, or we at team level also we can use?
Absolutely, absolutely. So it's interesting, right? At the team level, at the engineering level. So for us at Co8, at the leadership level, we use it every day. So again, you know, what is the problem? What is the outcome? Let's run an experiment to validate what we're thinking. Let's talk to our customers. So it's that mindset and that practice. And I think it's at the team level, right? So work with your UX. Sometimes what we see with on the engineering team, right? Feeling once removed with the customers. So how can you tag along on either customer interviews? Maybe you're a note taker, so you have a active role. So this is so it's both like learning about the customer and the ways we solve problems and identify solutions. So the process is the same. It's definitely the same. And as you get more familiar with the tools, you'll start to be able to adapt your process to integrate some of them.
Okay. The next question is from Ravi. Isn't Agile Manifesto an iterative and incremental delivery via a Scrum framework, for example, already overlap with the design thinking?
Absolutely, absolutely. There's what I realize is that often between Scrum and Agile and design thinking is the language is a little bit different, and like it's a 90% overlap. It's the exact same thing. It's just in the application of it and the language that we use around it. Because when Agile is done well, when Scrum is done well, you run those experiments, you talk to your customer, you adapt as quickly, as efficiently as possible. So it's the overlap is tremendous. Thank you for pointing it out.
Yeah. So next question is from Pramod. How can design thinking be used to solve people management problems or improve people leadership capabilities?
Yeah. So it's interesting. People management problems. So again, it's focusing on the desired behavior. So what is the desired outcome? Do we clearly understand the problem and what is the desired outcome? And then to invite the you know, if there's improvement for an employee, to invite this employee in a way in the co-design and in the co-creation of the solution. So do we agree on what the issue might be? Do we agree on what is the desired outcome? And let's partner to identify, to brainstorm some ideas and experiment with which solution will work best for this employee. So I'm not sure if it's along those lines that you were thinking about.
Yeah, that's fine. that is related, aligned with that. Okay, I have two more questions, so we'll take that even though we are very much close to our webinar, right? So the question is from Ajay, and so far, any problem statements we need to focus on getting 5 why answer is, and if we are doing that, is this a basic of design thinking approach?
It is. It is. Getting to the why, getting to the root cause is at the core of design thinking. So if you're a business analyst and you're familiar with the 5 again, there's a lot of overlap between different disciplines. So in, civil engineers, when they think about building bridges, they have a very, very similar toolkit. So same as business analysts who would be asking, the 5 whys, is already in the design thinking space.
Okay. So last question.
Am I allowed to ask a respective question? Is that okay, Ravi?
Yes, of course.
One more question I just wanted to, is that okay?
Yeah. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Melina. I just wanted to understand here, do we have a step-by-step sequence which we can follow to ensure that for any problem statement in any area, if we follow those step-by-step instruction, we will ensure that our design thinking approach is in place? Do we have some sequence of steps which you should follow, a process step?
Yeah. So yes, it's understanding the phases of design thinking, and in a longer workshop, we would start to define what techniques you can use at each point. Definitely.
Exactly. So that I can make this a common process for them, or it is like a template or framework. So this can be utilized either by BA or technical architect or team building activities or recruitment anywhere.
Yeah.
So where I can get that information that these are the sequence of steps which we should follow?
Oh, where? I'll have to follow up. I've developed my own playbook, and online. Yeah, I think we'll follow up on that.
Sure. Or if you have a playbook in your blog or anywhere, I would love to get that.
Actually, Ajay, if you look at the Luma Institute, LUMA, that's where I share the problem tree analysis from, they have a really nice, they have an online tool, they have an online techniques, they also have a book, and I think they've done a tremendous job presenting tools and techniques at each juncture and helping teams develop and adhere to a design thinking process. So Luma, LUMA. That would be great.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for.
Great. Okay, anyway, we are very much close to our, already we have overpassed the time also. So anyway, thanks a lot, Melanie, for your time. And I felt like everybody have got that enlightened with the things that you have tried to explain here. And there were lots of queries coming up. So definitely you can get in touch with our team, and probably you can reach out to Melanie through LinkedIn and other ways, right? And yes, of course, we will see that how much you can get answered those things. This particular recording will be also available, and anytime you can refer that as well. So I would like to thank all the participants for your time, and again, thanks a lot, Melanie. It was really a nice talking to you and getting those details. Yeah, thank you.
It was a pleasure. Thank you, everyone. See you soon. All right.